parte nel bastimento per terra assai lontana.
Hello, my name is Adrian Nestor of Angels Camp, and in the next few minutes I would like to explain to you a project that should touch the hearts of all of the residents of Calaveras County. What we're attempting to do here is to reconstruct this Romaggi home, this adobe home that was built in the 1850s by James Romaggi. In this area, he panned his first $1,000 that allowed him to go over to Malones and buy an interest in another gold mine that eventually secured him somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. This permitted him to come back into this area and buy this 100-acre plot that you see here today and build this home in which he married his bride and reared his 6 children. This is a great opportunity for us to rebuild this and reconstruct it as his original home and turn it into a museum for gold mine families. This is the entrance to the Catholic Cemetery in Angels Camp, which is the final resting place for many of the gold country families that contributions paved the way or formed the basis for Calaveras County that we enjoy so much today. Many of the names engraved here have descendants that live here today and can relate wonderful historical stories about their great-grandfathers and their great-grandmothers. These gold country pioneers, by their blood, sweat, and tears, and their many, many trials, tribulations, and triumphs, paved the way for what we enjoy today in the Motherlode. Some of the names that appear here are Pirano, Prothero, Prince, Oneida, Canepa, Areola, Raggio, and of course Romaggi. Girolamo Romaggi is the first headstone, the father of the clan, who changed his name later on to James. He came around the Horn in 1850 looking for gold. Also Andrea Romaggi, their second child of 6, and of course Louisa Romaggi. The view we are looking at now is looking from the west side, looking toward Route 49. This shows all 3 sections of the home built with stone, even though the 4th addition was built with wood. What a wonderful example to show how gold from the Motherlode permitted an Italian immigrant to buy his homestead, build his home for his family, much like they did in his native Genoa, Italy, where he was a stonemason. Note the smaller windows on the 3rd addition. This section was built a little bit differently in the style of constructions. The walls were less thick, and it was basically used for a dry storage area for the store, in which they stored coffee, sugar, flour, and meats. Examining the 2nd addition, built to match the main house that was built in 1852, 150 years ago, this southern addition matches the main home with 2-foot thick walls and locust headers shipped in from China that keeps the doors and windows square after all these years. This portion of the 2nd addition was a wine cellar. When Highway 49 passed next to the building before the 1985 relocation, a car ran into this end of the building, causing the damage you're seeing here. You can see the substantial floor joists to support the floors for the area where the stagecoach passengers slept overnight. Also the steel reinforcing rods that ran side to side within the house with large plates on the outside holding the walls to maintain their strength. Note the large rocks placed over the wine cellar door. What workmanship! Instead of continuing in the search for more gold, James Romaggi became a store, bar, and card room owner and operator while fathering and rearing 6 children in the same building. Notice the windows for the upstairs sleeping rooms and the doors leading to each separate section. You can see as we move around the building it was built in 4 steps or stages to match his family as the Romaggis grew from 2 to 8 people in a total of 17 years. This picture shows the extent of fruit trees and vineyards that surrounds the home in the late 1860s. The pipe bringing water for irrigation can be seen at the bottom left, the vineyard to the top right, and then the Miwok Indians who roamed and lived in the woods behind their house halfway up the hill, and a miner's tent at the very crest. It appears from this picture that the Romaggis grew their own fruits and vegetables for their own use as well as supply the store. While we show you other aspects of the structure, let me explain some details about the home today. It has been unoccupied since in the 1930s, and weather and father time have started to take their toll. The 0.69 acres of the site is presently owned through 6 shares of stock. The application to have the home designated as a National Historical Landmark will be made in January 2003. This will open the possibility for grants and matching funds to reconstruct the home as a museum. Source of the funds for this project will come from the following places: California Parks and Recreation, Proposition 40, Highway 49 Corridor, Ebbets Pass Scenic Byway, private donors, foundations, and charitable fundraisers. We also will be asking local contractors, once we have title to the property, to donate 1 day of their respective trade, plumbing, electrical, roofing, to bring the building up to today's standards of a historical landmark. You can almost hear the noise from the bar and the store as we look inside and hear footsteps of children playing and running around upstairs. Route 49, the old location, ran right by the main entrance to the home and the store. And the store was located to the right of the main door, and the bar to the rear of the room, with steps along the back wall leading to the bedrooms upstairs. The card table was to the left of the door. The hook in the ceiling is to raise a 4x4 trapdoor to get access to the roof cellar underneath the main floor. The first floor, as well as the second, have been burned over a period of time for heat during the Depression when homeless hobos occupied the home. I would like to mention at this time that we will be setting up a charitable foundation for the Gold Country Family Museum under the Calaveras Community Foundation at the beginning of 2003 to administer the funds for the reconstruction. They also will handle the grants and the donors, all tax deductible, and file all the appropriate tax returns. The iron hinges are for the typical solid iron shutters that were used in those days for security, and you can see these all over the motherlode as you go from building to building. We have also contacted a company in San Francisco that does this type of stone reconstruction and should be getting an estimate from them in early 2003. We also have been in contact with an architectural firm in Fremont that rebuilt an adobe in Fremont that was constructed in 1842. If anyone listening to this program is aware of some local stonemasons or firms that also do this type of reconstruction and are local, please call me and pass on this information, or pass on this request to someone you know that may be interested in helping on or participating. This is the north end of the building, where it's only the wooden admission was made. You can see where the roof line met the stone structure when we took this first video on November the 22nd. As you think back over the last few minutes of looking at this fine 150-year-old home, right on the main highway that all the tourists and history buffs and sightseers travel right by, that in all those 150 years, no one has tried to restore or maintain this beautiful example of our motherlode Gold Country heritage. So, here is our chance to keep this monument from passing into a pile of stone. How many times have you wondered about how great it would be to still have the train tracks from Sonora to Angels Camp? How about the Lightner Mine or the Utica? Now maybe those were impossible to reconstruct, but what jewels they would be for our tourist trade and additional tax dollars to Calaveras County today. If you are interested in finding out more about this project and lending a hand in the reconstruction process, please call Adrian Nestor at 209-736-9522. When we first videoed this home on November the 22nd, this particular wall that you're looking at now was standing erect. On December the 16th, during the storm that we had here locally that had a tremendous amount of wind and a lot of rain over a 2-day period, this wall crumbled to earth. And this is exactly what we mentioned earlier on in the fact that Father Time and nature takes its toll on this kind of a structure that was built over 150 years ago. So our intent now is to try to accelerate this program to get this building reconstructed before anything like this happens to the other parts of the structure. Hello again, my name is Adrian Nestor. Still, I was on the beginning part of the video that you just witnessed. We made that in 2003. So in 12 years, we decided it was time to give you an update on all the things that we have accomplished. And we're now in a position where we have structural engineering options on how we can restore or brace the building. And so we're into a fundraising mode and we'll need your help. So what I'd like to do first is I would like to cover for you all the accomplishments that we have made and the changes made since we did the first video. And of course, that video was when I was only a year and a half into the quest to restore the building and turn it into a museum. So a lot of things have happened since that time. I will go over the ownership a little bit later in a sequence talking about the house itself. But number one, we did have the lot surveyed and we discovered that we had some 2,200 square feet we needed from an adjoining property owner, and that took us 18 months to accomplish what you call a lot line adjustment. I'm only pointing that out to show you that these things move very slowly, and certainly for me, they have moved a lot slower than I thought. The other thing is we have already accomplished the cultural resource study, which is called an archaeological reconnaissance. And then we had 3 fundraisers that we raised and netted about $45,000, which was very good for our group. Then we have some very good descendant support. I have located 11 of the descendants of the Romaggi family, and 2 of those, particularly a great-great-grandson and a great-great-granddaughter, have been very generous in making donations to the problem. We also, just in April last year, put in the off-ramp from Highway 49 to our property. One of the things you have to do in Calaveras County and for the state is you have to be able to get an ambulance and a fire truck onto your property. And they changed the rules so that you cannot have more than a 15-degree slope. So that's the reason we had to move the ramp and go through the lot line adjustment. The other thing is we have 2 sets of weather tarps we put on the building because there is a big hole in the roof in the rear of the building. The first set was not very firm and it didn't work, and then we put a much thicker version on the second time, and they seem to do the job. What we're trying to do is to keep water intrusion from coming into the foundation where we have all the walls and some of the walls are starting to crumble. The other thing we did is we have 3 support structures that we put in front of the building, and if you drive by there today you will see those, and I will show you them in pictures later, and that's holding up the front wall. Then we have another set of structures on the rear wall, and we have reinforced the 3rd building from the inside because it was having a tendency to cave in on itself. We did put a French drain behind the whole building to try to take the water from the hill behind us and get it around the building rather than against the foundations. And we also had to take a large pine tree out, and we have to maintain the site. Even though we don't own the property from the highway to our property line. We want to have it looking nice so people will stop and come up and make an inquiry looking at the placard we have in front that shows the history of the story of the building. And then we also made 12 slide presentations, which I did before I had a board, so that we could try to secure some original funds, which we were successful. We did make 34 grant requests throughout foundations in the state of California, and that did not turn out very well for us. I also sent off 6 celebrity and philanthropic letters to people like Andrew Luck, Nicolas Cage, Barbara Bush, because all those people have a lot of money, and I thought maybe since they might not want to pay taxes on all of that, they might be able to give me some for my project, but that didn't seem to work out. I've also, as I said, I've located 11 of the descendants. I visited 6 of them personally. We have 3 local TV shows, this being the 3rd one that we've had on Comcast Channel 7 in Calaveras County. And I must tell you that those really did turn out well, because when they ran in the evening, the next day I would get phone calls from men that were either retired or unemployed or wanted to volunteer to help on the project when we got to that phase. So they would be a stonemason or a glazer for the windows or things like that. So it really did help. I also attended the Italian Heritage Festival down in San Jose last August, and I got a lot of help from Ken Borelli, who is the president of the Italian American Historic Foundation in San Jose. Also a man I met there by the name of Paul Ramon, and he is one of the what they call the Italian legends in the Los Angeles area. He lives in Palm Springs, and he's been helping me quite a bit. I also did 27 newspaper articles to try to get the publicity out every time there was something happening at the job site. And that has helped quite a bit also. And then, of course, what happened is when I started this by myself, I was under the umbrella of the Calaveras Community Foundation. What that means is that I would go out and raise the money, send it to them. They would pay the bills. They would send the thank you letters. And it was pretty easy to operate that way because they were a 501c3. Then in 2006, I discovered that if I wanted to make a grant request to get big chunks of money, I had to be my own 501c3 and I had to have a board. So in 2006, we established the Romaggi-Adobe Association Board with 6 members, and we became our own 501c3, and we also now, of course, have our tax code. So we're all set up to accept funds from any organization or any individual to help us with our effort. Now I would like to, just for a few minutes, try to tell you a little bit more about James Romaggi and how he accomplished the building, because when I was talking in 2003, I really didn't know much about him or his family at that time. What happened is at that time I said he left Italy. Actually, he left Liguria because Italy was not a unified country in 1850. So he left Liguria as a 22-year-old fellow, came directly to New York City. He worked as an assistant cook on the ship, and he didn't have enough money to get around the Horn. So he rented a monkey grinder, and he got enough money to pay half of his fare, and he made his way around the Horn. While in New York City, though, he purchased a gold $10 gold piece that was minted in New Orleans in 1848, and I have that to put in the museum with his family history. When he got to San Francisco, he came directly to Albany Flats, so I'm supposing that he probably followed some Italian family that had come earlier for the gold rush. And he found $1,000 worth of gold straight across from where he built the house in an area called the Mud Gulch. He took that $1,000, and I'd like to remind you at this point that he was 24 years old, he could not speak English, and he could not read or write. So anybody that's having trouble in school today and thinks they can't be successful, you don't have to be a PhD or a college graduate if you have a lot of courage and a lot of integrity and a lot of initiative, because he came around all that distance by himself as a 24-year-old, had $1,000 in gold, went over to Malonis and bought a claim that wasn't turning out for the people that had it at the time, and in less than 3 months he had $40,000 in gold. Now, in today's money, that would be $770,000. So here's a 24-year-old man, couldn't speak English, couldn't read or write, that was basically a millionaire. So what he did is he was a stonemason by trade. He already had a trade at age 24, and he bought a 100-acre quartz claim in Albany Flats. That's what that area was called. And he took all the schist rock from that 100-acre quartz claim, and he planed it and chiseled it, and he made a 2-story house for his family. Then he returned to Italy, at that time it was a country, and married Luisa Fopiano, who was his girlfriend, and brought her back to the United States. And they had 6 children. They had 4 girls and 2 boys. And what's interesting about that is that in those days you didn't go to Stockton or Modesto to get a girlfriend, you went down the road. So 2 of the sisters married 2 brothers from the Gazzola family who lived in Angels Camp. A brother and a sister, Romaggi, married a brother and a sister from the Perano family, which lived down the road, and a brother and a sister married a brother and a sister from the DiMartini that lived in the other end of the road. So 6 children only married into 3 families, which I think is rather interesting. And I have located a lot of those, and they have given me a lot of the information about the family. Then he also, at that point, gave up gold mining or looking for gold and turned his home into a bar, a store, a card room, and as best we can determine, at least a stagecoach rest stop, if not, in fact, a stagecoach stop. And so that's what he did the rest of his life. One of the interesting sidelights, too, about his education, he didn't understand how to read or write. So obviously he didn't know mathematics, but he had a system on the back behind his store counter that he would calculate how much you owed him. And in those days, you did everything on credit until you came in at the end of the week with your poke. So if you knew that you owed James Romaggi $16.32, you went in and asked him, "James, how much do I owe you?" And he would turn around and look at his hieroglyphics on the wall, and he would turn around and say, $16.32. So we have no idea how it worked. None of his children understood it, but that's how he made his way through being a businessman without being able to read and write. And I saw a lot of paperwork later on in his life, and he still had to sign his name with an X. He died in 1907, and she died in 1917. At that point, the people that inherited the house rented it out for a period of time, and then that didn't work out, and so it became empty. It was empty during the Depression. During that time, the hobos lived there, and they burnt the furniture, and they burnt a lot of the flooring, and of course the juvenile delinquents came in and wrote all over the walls and that sort of stuff. So it really was in pretty bad shape. And here's the part about getting secured ownership. When I talked to you in 2003, I only owned 3 shares out of 6 of the ownership of the property. And what happened is, when I moved in September 2001, I saw that building and I had an idea what I wanted to do with it. On December the 27th, there was an article in the paper that the man that owned 3 of the 6 shares of ownership would give it to somebody or anybody that would had an idea what to do with it. I went to Rockland the next day, and he gave me his 3 shares. He was the president of the Lighthouse of the Blind, and he bought the other 2 shares out of back taxes. What happened is, in 1940, a man by the name of Wiltsey, he was the 2nd vice president of the California Historical Society, bought the property, and he bought just 0.89 acres. And he was going to restore the building. He had written 3 or 4 books about the gold country transportation, an express mail system, steamships from San Francisco to Stockton and Sacramento, and so on. Unfortunately, he died intestate in 1944. In 1957, the Bank of America Trust Company in Sacramento divided the property into 6 6 equal shares. And the guy in charge of that gave them to religious or health organizations in the Bay Area. Number 1 was Lighthouse of the Blind. Number 2 was Cannon Kip Community House. Number 3 was a nursing home. 1 was the San Mateo Privatorium. And so each one of those 6 individual organizations received a check for $12,500. So if you do the math, that was $75,000, which in 1944 he could easily have rebuilt the house. He also bought a store up near Quincy called the Clicker Store. I haven't been able to see it yet. I'm not interested in it. I have enough trouble with the one I'm trying to work on. So what happened is that the San Mateo Privatorium gave me his share immediately. The last 2 shares were purchased by a gentleman out of Carmel that was in the business of doing that. He gave 1 share to his wife and 1 share to his young daughter. He died, his wife remarried, changed her name. His young daughter grew up, got married, changed her name. So it took me 2 years to get those last 2 shares. But by January the 1st, 2004, I owned the 0.89 acres, and it did not cost me 1 penny. So that's how we had secured the ownership to the property. Now what I'd like to do is just show you some backups to some of the particular items that might be of interest to you about the home and about the family. Number 1, this is his home in Romaggi, Italy. It still has 58 people living in it. It's over 200 years old, and if you'll notice, it has the same kind of wood over the windows that he has over the home out here in Albany Flats. I just had one of my board members visit there last October. There's still 58 people living in the village. There is somebody living in this home, and there are 3 Romaggi families out of the 58 people living on top of the hill. This is the last time one of the descendants of the Romaggi family went to Romaggi, and this was in 1989, and this is Amelia Romaggi and her son Enrico. This is a picture of, the only picture I have of James and Louisa sitting in front of the store, and they had these beautiful roses that they brought in from Italy, and you can still see the roots of those sticking out of the side of the building. This is a picture of the 100-acre quartz claim that he purchased, and you can see the whole hill is covered with grapevines because he made his own wine. And then down in front here, you see the garden where he grew his potatoes and everything for the store. And you see the pipe here coming across. He did dig, the only thing he did of any civic interest was he dug what they called the Italian ditch from Vallecito to his property to get water for his grapes. And originally I thought these figures up here on the hill were Indians because the Miwok Indians lived up on the hill, and Mary Dixie was one of those that did help Mrs. Romaggi sometimes with the children. But it turns out when you take a closer look at that, it's little kids playing up there with jonipers on, which is the kind of pants that kids wore in those days. This picture here is from the south end, the Sonora end, and it shows the building in pretty condition at that time, and we estimate this is probably sometime in the 1940s. This is in 1989 before they moved the highway, and the highway ran right in front of the house so that if you were on the passenger side of the car, you could reach out the window and you could touch the edge of the building. You'll also see here that he had a wooden addition at one time, and we don't know when it was built or when it burned down, but it was no longer there, but it did hold 2 bedrooms, a parlor, and a kitchen. Down here we see the Sonora end, which was the stagecoach sleeping area, and it had a tunnel between it and the main building and between it and the 3rd building. But in 1989, a car came around the corner and ran into the end of the building, and so they moved the highway in 1989, and they moved it 100 feet to the east. So that's why now we have to put in an off-ramp, because originally you could step right out his front door and you were in the highway. When we had somebody visit the Romaggi village, this man came out of the Romaggi home. Unfortunately, Italy probably has 30 or 40 dialects of the Italian language. So the person that went over there representing us could not speak to him or talk to him or understand what he was saying. He has, I think it's a cell phone here in his pocket, and we are hoping that someday we can get his cell phone number, get maybe 6 or 7 Italians together, and they can understand what he's talking about to find out if they're the originals. This is one of the married sisters from the Pirano family, and this is, as you know, in Angels Camp we have 3 cemeteries. We have a Protestant, a Catholic, and a Serbian, and the Romaggi plot is in the Catholic cemetery. A lot of artists over a period of time have drawn the house, and this is one that was done before 1989 when the highway went in front of. And as you saw at the end of the first video, in December of 2002, we had 2 days of heavy rain and a lot of wind, and my north wall facing Angels Camp tumbled down on me, and we're trying to make sure that we get to this restoration before any more of that activity happens. And this is a picture of Mr. Wiltsey, who is the man that bought it in 1940. And this is a copy of the Archaeological Reconnaissance Survey that they did. And this is how we're going to handle the Gold Country Family Museum. What this is a large placard about 3 feet across the top and 4 feet deep. What you do is you take a picture of the matriarch and the patriarch, like James and Louisa Romaggi, and then you put below that all the pictures of the children and the children's children and the children's children until you get down to the bottom and there's some baggy pants kid playing basketball for Bret Hart High School or something like that. And then in the middle, what you do is you write a story about them, where they came from, because a lot of people came here looking for gold, but it didn't turn out for them, so they became blacksmiths and shop owners and bankers and store owners and whatever. So you tell the story. And this is not my creative idea. I saw that at a museum in Oro, Oregon, which is where they have the Palouse, where they probably grow 50% of the wheats and the grains for the cereal companies in Chicago, Illinois. Now, I'd like to thank everybody for helping me with this project, and I have a real good board, and I just want to check my notes here and make sure that I'm not forgetting something. As I did attend, there is another lady by the name of Maria Gloria that's helping me quite a bit. She writes for the book, newspaper, Italio Americano, and she has 2 articles in there about the Romaggi project. And I also would like to tell you that this weekend, I spend all weekend over in Sutter Creek at the Italian picnic. And so what I'm doing now is what we're going to do is we're going to take all the lodge numbers that we can find for the Italian organizations in the state of California, and we are going to send you a copy of this video, and then we're hoping you will take that to your club. And if each one of the clubs here, and there's a lot more than this in the state of California, then we're going to hope that we will get maybe $100 or $500 from each club, and we'll be able to meet our goal. Now, the 3 options that I've been talking about by the engineering firm come in at a price. The first option comes in at $497,000. So this is no easy thing we're trying to do here. The second option, and that basically is just bracing. The second option is you do it a little bit better, and you could maybe have people go around and safely look inside the building. Right now, you have to be careful with that. And then number 3 option is $801,000, and that means you can turn it into a museum, you can walk inside safely, and you can do anything you want to. So that is our appeal, and please help us if you possibly can. Thank you very much.
Parte bastimento, per terra assai lontana, canta una burdessa napolitana.